I'm Leah Mitchell, 38, and I've spent nearly 2 decades raising my son Brandon alone while watching my younger sister Amanda coast through life on a wave of privilege. My son's wedding day should have been perfect, the culmination of all our struggles and sacrifices. Instead, Amanda turned it into a stage for my public humiliation with 4 devastating words: my jobless loser sister. What she didn't know was that her own boss was listening, and karma was about to strike with breathtaking swiftness. Before I share how my sister's cruelty at my son's wedding backfired spectacularly, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had a family member try to humiliate you in public. Let's get into this wild story. Growing up, it was always clear who the favorite child was in our household. My sister Amanda, 3 years younger than me, seemed blessed with every advantage from the moment she was born. She was naturally prettier with her perfect blonde curls while I had unruly brown hair that never behaved. She was outgoing and charming where I was quiet and bookish. She breezed through school with straight A's while I had to study twice as hard for BS and occasional A's. Our parents, Robert and Patricia Mitchell, weren't subtle about their preference. When Amanda needed new clothes, we'd spend a weekend shopping at the mall. When I needed something, I'd hear about the budget being tight that month. For her 16th birthday, Amanda received a used but nice car. For mine, I got a watch and a reminder that I could use the family car if I paid for my own gas. I started working part-time at 15, first at the local library shelving books, then at a coffee shop on weekends. Every dollar I earned went into my college fund. Meanwhile, my parents assured Amanda not to worry about working during high school. They had her college covered, and she should focus on maintaining her perfect GPA and cheerleading activities. Despite the obvious favoritism, I didn't resent my sister when we were younger. We had our moments of sisterly bonding, late-night talks, shared secrets, inside jokes. But as we moved through high school, the gap between us widened. Amanda's circle of friends consisted of the popular crowd, while I found my place among the quieter, studious types. My life veered dramatically off course during my sophomore year at the State University. I was 19 and had been dating Michael Henderson for about 8 months when I discovered I was pregnant. We had been careful, but birth control isn't foolproof. When I told Michael, his response was immediate and cold: get an abortion or deal with it alone. He wanted to become a doctor and wasn't about to let a baby derail his plans. I spent a week in agony, weighing my options. In the end, I couldn't go through with terminating the pregnancy. Something inside me already loved the tiny life growing within me, despite the terrible circumstances. When I told Michael my decision, he cleared out his dorm room and transferred to a university across the country. Just like that, he was gone. Telling my parents was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My father's disappointment was palpable, his silent headshaking more devastating than any yelling could have been. My mother cried, asking repeatedly where she had gone wrong. Amanda, home for the weekend, stood in the corner of the living room with a smirk that said, "I always knew you'd screw up." "So much for college," Amanda said later that night, passing me in the hallway. "Guess some people just can't handle freedom responsibly." My parents did allow me to move back home, with conditions. I would continue my education at community college, work to contribute to household expenses, and be solely responsible for the baby's needs. They would provide a roof, but little else. I gave birth to Brandon in the spring. He was perfect, a tiny bundle with Michael's dark hair and my green eyes. The moment I held him, I knew I would do anything to give him a good life, no matter how hard I had to work. And work I did. I took a semester off, then enrolled in community college classes while juggling part-time jobs. My mother would watch Brandon when our schedules aligned, but I often relied on a network of affordable sitters and fellow student parents for childcare. I was perpetually exhausted, splitting my time between diapers, textbooks, and minimum wage work. Meanwhile, Amanda sailed through her undergraduate program at a prestigious private university, courtesy of our parents. She joined a sorority, studied abroad in Paris, and interned at a major marketing firm the summer before her senior year. Her social media was a highlight reel of parties, tropical spring breaks, and designer shopping trips. When she'd come home for holidays, Amanda would make a show of playing with Brandon for about 5 minutes before handing him back to me when he fussed or needed changing. "I don't know how you do it," she'd say, but her tone made it clear this wasn't admiration, it was pity mixed with superiority. "I could never sacrifice my youth like this." "Don't you ever regret it?" "I never did. Not even during the hardest nights when Brandon was teething and I had an exam the next day. Not when I missed out on normal college experiences. Not when I saw my former classmates graduating on time while I was still piecing together credits. Brandon became my purpose, and watching him grow into a kind, curious child made everything worthwhile." By the time Brandon started elementary school, the distance between Amanda and me had grown into a chasm. She had moved to the city for her marketing job, visiting home only for obligatory holidays. Our conversations became increasingly superficial. She'd talk about her latest promotion or vacation, and I'd share Brandon's school achievements, both of us going through the motions of sisterhood without the substance. Our parents remained firmly in Amanda's corner. They'd drive 3 hours to attend her company parties but frequently missed Brandon's school events despite living in the same town. They proudly displayed her college graduation photos on the mantle while my community college certificate was tucked away in a drawer. "Your sister really made something of herself," my mother would comment, the implication hanging in the air that I had not. It didn't matter that I was raising a wonderful child or that I had earned my degree against all odds. In their eyes, I would always be defined by my mistake. I moved out of my parents' house when Brandon was 7. Having finally saved enough for a modest 2-bedroom apartment. It was a stretch financially, but the freedom from daily judgment was worth every penny of tight budgeting. Brandon and I established our own traditions, our own little family unit fortified against the subtle cruelties of my blood relatives. As Brandon grew, he began to notice the dynamics himself. "Why doesn't Grandma come to my baseball games?" he asked once. "Aunt Amanda says it's because you and Grandma don't get along." It broke my heart to realize Amanda was planting seeds of doubt in my son's mind, making him think I was somehow responsible for my parents' conditional love. From then on, I made a point of never speaking negatively about any family member in front of Brandon. He would form his own opinions without my influence. By the time Brandon was in high school, he had indeed formed those opinions. He was polite to his grandparents and aunt but had a natural detector for insincerity. He gravitated toward authenticity, a quality his aunt sorely lacked. This only made Amanda try harder to win his affection with expensive gifts and promises of connections when he got older, which Brandon accepted with gracious skepticism. Throughout these years, the contrast between our lives continued to sharpen. Amanda climbed the corporate ladder, bought a luxury condo, and dated a series of successful men. I patched together a living through various jobs while putting Brandon's needs first, my dating life practically non-existent. But while she had material success, I had something she couldn't buy, a genuine, loving relationship with my son. My career path looked nothing like the neat, upward trajectory of my sister's. Where Amanda had a clear direction from college internship to entry-level position to management, my employment history resembled a patchwork quilt of necessity. In Brandon's early years, I worked wherever I could find flexible hours, retail during the day when he was at childcare, waitressing evenings when a neighbor could watch him, weekend receptionist at a hair salon. None of these jobs offered benefits or advancement, but they kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. When Brandon started elementary school, I attempted to find more stable employment. I landed an administrative assistant position at a local insurance office with regular hours and modest health insurance. For 3 years, things were relatively steady. I was even able to start a small savings account, tucking away $50 here, $30 there, never enough to feel secure, but better than nothing. Then came the childcare challenges. Brandon developed severe asthma, requiring frequent doctor visits and occasional hospital stays. My absences from work, though unavoidable, were met with decreasing patience from my employer. "I understand you're a single mother," my manager said during my performance review, "but we need someone reliable. Your personal problems can't keep affecting the office." I wanted to explain that my son's health wasn't a personal problem but a priority that any parent would put first. Instead, I nodded and promised to improve, knowing it was a promise I might not be able to keep. Sure enough, 3 months later, after missing 2 days when Brandon had a particularly severe asthma attack, I was let go. The next phase of my career began out of desperation. With a gap in my resume and Brandon's medical needs making traditional employment difficult, I turned to virtual work. I became a virtual assistant, handling administrative tasks for small business owners from my home computer. The pay was less than my office job, but the flexibility allowed me to be there for Brandon. During this time, Amanda's career at DG Trend Marketing was flourishing. She had started as a junior account manager and quickly risen to lead major campaigns for national clients. Her Instagram featured business trips to New York and Los Angeles, designer outfits for client meetings, and networking events with industry influencers. "You should really think about getting a real career," she told me during a rare coffee meeting. "Brandon's getting older now. You can't keep doing these little odd jobs forever." "What kind of example are you setting?" I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that raising a kind, resilient child while overcoming constant obstacles was perhaps the best example I could set. Instead, I simply said, "We're doing fine, thanks." We weren't actually doing fine. The virtual assistant work was drying up as more people entered the field willing to work for even less than I charged. I decided to leverage my bookkeeping skills, honed through necessity managing our tight budget, and started a small home-based bookkeeping service for local businesses. For a while, it worked. I built a small client base of mom-and-pop shops who appreciated my attention to detail and reasonable rates. I could schedule work around Brandon's school hours and activities. For the first time, I felt like I was building something of my own rather than just surviving paycheck to paycheck. Then the economic downturn hit. Small businesses were the first to cut expenses, and outsourced bookkeeping was an easy service to eliminate. Within 6 months, I lost over half my clients. The remainder reduced my hours to the bare minimum. Once again, I found myself scrambling. Brandon was in high school now, requiring less physical presence but more financial support. Sports equipment, school trips, college preparation expenses. I picked up night shifts at a 24-hour grocery store to supplement my dwindling bookkeeping income. During a family dinner celebrating Amanda's promotion to marketing director, she couldn't resist commenting on my situation. "If you'd finished your business degree instead of, well, you know," she said, gesturing vaguely in Brandon's direction, "you might be where I am now." Brandon, 16 and increasingly protective of me, set down his fork. "Where exactly is that, Aunt Amanda?" "Alone in a fancy apartment with no one who actually cares about you unless you're picking up the check." The table fell silent. My mother gasped. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Amanda's face flushed red. "Brandon," I said quietly, "that's enough." He apologized, not to Amanda but to our parents for disrupting dinner. Later at home, I gently suggested he not fight my battles. "Someone needs to stand up for you, Mom," he insisted. "You never do it yourself." His words stayed with me, prompting a period of reflection. Why had I accepted the narrative that my life was somehow less valuable because it hadn't followed a conventional path? Why did I allow Amanda's achievements to diminish my own? This revelation coincided with a new interest. While updating my ancient laptop, I found myself drawn to web design tutorials. The visual creative aspects appealed to me in a way spreadsheets never had. I began spending my limited free time learning HTML, CSS, and basic design principles through free online resources. To my surprise, I had a natural aptitude for it. I redesigned my bookkeeping service website, which led to one client asking if I could update their site as well. That first paid design project, though small, ignited something in me, a passion I hadn't felt professionally before. I began intentionally steering my career in this new direction. I took online courses while working night shifts, building a portfolio through pro bono projects for local nonprofits. I joined web design forums and studied constantly, absorbing knowledge about user experience, responsive design, and digital accessibility. My bookkeeping clients dwindled to just 3 loyal businesses, but my web design projects began to increase. The pay was better, the work more satisfying. For the first time, I wasn't just working to survive, I was developing a career I genuinely enjoyed. Of course, Amanda was dismissive when I mentioned my new direction. Web design? Isn't that oversaturated? Everyone with a laptop thinks they're a designer now. She laughed. Let me know when you want me to connect you with the hiring manager for our admin team. At least that's stable. I declined her backhanded offer, continuing to build my skills and portfolio instead. As Brandon's senior year progressed and college acceptances began arriving, I knew I needed to level up my income to help with his education expenses. His academic scholarship would cover tuition, but there would be many other costs. That's when I saw the job posting, Junior Web Designer at Tech Future, an innovative startup developing educational technology. The position offered a substantial salary, benefits, and growth potential. The required skills matched my self-taught abilities, though I lacked the formal design degree they preferred. Against all odds, my portfolio got me an interview. The technical assessment went well, and the team seemed impressed by my unconventional background. Self-taught designers often have the most creative approaches, the creative director noted. I left feeling cautiously optimistic, but weeks passed without word. I followed up once, receiving a polite response that they were still making decisions. As Brandon's graduation approached, followed closely by his summer wedding to his college girlfriend Emma, I tried to focus on these milestones rather than my career uncertainty. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, I spotted another job listing that excited me, this one at DG Trend, Amanda's company. The position was for a digital experience designer, focusing on website optimization for their clients. The listing mentioned potential remote work options, which would be perfect for my situation. I debated whether to apply, knowing Amanda would likely see it as encroaching on her territory. But the position seemed ideal for my skills, and I couldn't let family dynamics dictate my professional choices anymore. I submitted my application and portfolio link, not mentioning it to Amanda or anyone else. The night before Brandon's wedding, as I was helping with last-minute preparations, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Tech Future wanted to schedule a second interview the following week. I allowed myself a moment of pure joy before tucking the phone away. Tomorrow was about Brandon and Emma, not my career prospects. But for the first time in years, I felt like my professional life might finally be gaining momentum. Brandon met Emma Reynolds during their sophomore year of college. They were paired as lab partners in organic chemistry, and according to Brandon, he was smitten from the moment she confidently corrected his equation balancing. Emma was brilliant, kind, and came from a stable, loving family, everything I had wanted for my son. The first time Brandon brought Emma home during spring break, I was immediately struck by how she treated him with genuine respect and affection. Unlike the few girlfriends he'd introduced me to in high school, Emma seemed to truly see Brandon for who he was, not just the handsome, charming exterior, but his thoughtful, hard-working nature. Emma's parents, David and Catherine Reynolds, owned a successful chain of hardware stores across 3 states. They were wealthy but unpretentious, and from our first meeting at a parents' weekend event, they treated me with warmth and inclusion. They never made me feel lesser for being a single mother with modest means, something I had grown accustomed to from other parents throughout Brandon's schooling. Brandon called me on a Sunday evening during the first semester of his senior year, his voice trembling with excitement. "Mom," she said, "yes. We're engaged." My heart swelled with happiness even as my mind immediately raced to practical concerns. Brandon and Emma had just turned 22. They still had months of school left. And weddings cost money I didn't have in abundance. When I voiced some of these concerns gently, Brandon reassured me. "We're planning to wait until after graduation in May, then have a summer wedding." Emma's parents offered to help with the costs, but I told them we want to keep it simple. Simple, I would soon learn, meant very different things to different people. 2 weeks later, I sat in the Reynolds' spacious living room as Catherine unfolded a wedding planning binder already 2 inches thick. Emma, glowing with excitement, outlined their vision: a ceremony at her family's church followed by a reception at the Grand Hilton Hotel downtown. The guest list started at 150 people. "We want to keep it intimate," Emma said, not noticing my widening eyes at what constituted intimate in their world. David Reynolds cleared his throat. "Leah, Catherine, and I would like to cover the wedding expenses. Brandon's been like a son to us already, and we'd be honored to do this for the kids." I felt a complex mix of gratitude and inadequacy. "That's incredibly generous, but I'd like to contribute something. Brandon is my son." "Of course," Catherine said kindly. "Perhaps you could handle the rehearsal dinner? Or the bridal shower?" Even though smaller events would stretch my budget to breaking point, but I nodded, unwilling to admit my limitations in that moment. When Amanda learned about the engagement and the Reynolds' financial involvement, her reaction was predictably cutting. "Well, thank goodness for Emma's family," she said during a family dinner. "Can you imagine what kind of wedding these kids would have had otherwise? Probably the community center with potluck catering." My mother laughed nervously while my father pretended to be very interested in his mashed potatoes. Brandon, who had stepped away to take a phone call, missed the comment. I simply smiled tightly and changed the subject. As wedding planning progressed, I found myself increasingly sidelined. Not maliciously, Emma included me in dress shopping and menu tastings, but practically. When decisions came down to financial considerations, my input became less relevant since I wasn't footing the bill. I focused instead on areas where I could contribute meaningfully. I designed their wedding website, coordinated with Brandon's distant relatives, and helped address invitations in my best handwriting. I threw myself into planning a modest but lovely rehearsal dinner at a local restaurant owned by a former bookkeeping client who offered me a generous discount. Amanda, meanwhile, inserted herself into the process at every opportunity. Though she had no official role in the wedding party, Emma had chosen her college roommates as bridesmaids. She attended nearly every planning event, offering unsolicited advice and name-dropping vendors who had worked on her company's events. "You simply must use Elegance Floral," she told Emma. "They did our CEO's daughter's wedding. I can make a call." Emma, to her credit, handled Amanda's interference with grace, taking suggestions politely but ultimately making her own decisions with Brandon. This only seemed to intensify Amanda's efforts to influence the proceedings. One afternoon, while helping Emma assemble favor boxes, I overheard Amanda on the phone in the next room. "Yes, I'll definitely be bringing a +1 to my nephew's wedding," she was saying. "James Richardson, yes, my CEO. He's between relationships right now, and I mentioned the wedding would be quite the affair. No, my sister can barely afford to contribute. She's between jobs." Again. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. Not only was Amanda using Brandon's wedding as a networking opportunity, but she was also spreading information about my employment situation that wasn't hers to share. When she returned to the dining room, I said nothing, focusing intently on tying perfect bows on the little boxes. Emma, who had also overheard, squeezed my hand under the table. That evening, Brandon called, upset. "Mom, did Aunt Amanda tell you she's bringing her boss to the wedding? Without asking us first?" "I overheard her mentioning it today," I admitted. "Emma and I already finalized the seating chart. We're at our guest limit with the venue. I don't understand why she thinks she can just add people. Do you want me to talk to her?" I offered, though the thought made my stomach clench. "No, I already called her. She acted like I was being unreasonable, said it was just one person and that her boss is practically family since she's worked for him for years." Brandon sighed. I gave in. I don't want drama before the wedding. We'll make it work. As the wedding date approached, I took on extra freelance design projects, working late into the night to save enough for a special gift for the couple, a honeymoon excursion I knew they wanted but had cut from their budget. I also needed to buy a mother-of-the-groom dress that wouldn't look embarrassingly out of place among the designer outfits that would undoubtedly be worn by the Reynolds family and their social circle. I found a simple but elegant navy blue dress on clearance and spent my saved alterations budget having it tailored to fit perfectly. It wasn't designer, but it was the most beautiful thing I'd owned in years, and when I tried it on after the final alterations, I allowed myself to feel genuinely pretty for the first time in a long while. The night before the wedding, after the rehearsal dinner, which went beautifully despite my anxiety, Brandon asked me to take a walk with him around the hotel grounds. We strolled in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "I wanted to thank you, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for tomorrow or the dinner tonight, but for everything. For every sacrifice you made so I could have a good life." Tears sprang to my eyes. "Brandon, you don't need to." "I do need to," he interrupted gently. "I know it wasn't easy raising me alone. I know about the nights you thought I was asleep when you were balancing checkbooks and crying at the kitchen table. I remember the times you went without so I could have what I needed for school or sports." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Emma and I have talked about this a lot. We want you to know that we see you, really see you, and everything you've done. You're the strongest person I know, and if I'm a good husband to Emma, it's because you showed me what unconditional love looks like." I couldn't hold back the tears then. My son, my beautiful boy who had grown into such an extraordinary man, pulled me into a tight hug. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "And I'm so proud to be your son." In that moment, every struggle, every sacrifice, every humiliation at the hands of my family faded away. This was success. Not a corner office or a prestigious title, but raising a child who had become a compassionate, appreciative adult. No matter what happened tomorrow or at the reception, I had already won the only prize that truly mattered. I woke before my alarm on the morning of Brandon's wedding, my mind already cycling through the day's timeline. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon, with the reception to follow at 5:30 in the Grand Hilton's ballroom. I had a hair appointment at 10 and was expected at Emma's suite by noon to help with final preparations. The hotel room I'd splurged on for the weekend offered a beautiful view of the city skyline. I sat by the window with my coffee, allowing myself this quiet moment before the whirlwind began. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "Morning, Mom. Big day. Love you." Such a simple message, but it brought fresh tears to my eyes. I replied with my own love and encouragement, then forced myself to eat a light breakfast, knowing from experience that wedding days often passed in a blur with few opportunities for meals. At the hotel salon, the stylist worked wonders with my hair, creating an elegant updo that made me feel sophisticated. I applied my makeup carefully in my room afterward, aiming for a natural but polished look. When I slipped into my navy dress and stepped back to view the full effect in the mirror, a surprising thought crossed my mind: I looked good. Not just presentable, but genuinely attractive. The woman in the reflection looked confident and dignified, someone who belonged at her son's upscale wedding. This boost of confidence carried me to Emma's suite, where I found her mother Catherine orchestrating a carefully choreographed ballet of hairstylists, makeup artists, and photographers. Emma sat in a plush robe by the window, looking surprisingly calm amid the activity. "Leah," she exclaimed when she saw me. "You look absolutely beautiful." Catherine turned and nodded approvingly. "That color is perfect on you. Now, we've got mimosas and a light lunch spread in the adjoining room. Emma wanted you to help with her something borrowed if you brought it?" I had. It was a simple pearl bracelet, the only piece of fine jewelry I owned, a gift from my grandmother on my 16th birthday. I'd mentioned it to Emma months ago, and she had immediately asked if she could wear it for the wedding. As I helped fasten it around her wrist, Emma squeezed my hand. "Thank you for raising such an amazing man," she whispered. "And for welcoming me into your family." The moment was interrupted by the suite door bursting open. Amanda swept in, 3 hours later than she had promised to arrive, wearing a dress that seemed more appropriate for a cocktail party than a daytime wedding, form-fitting, with a neckline that would definitely draw attention. Sorry I'm late, she announced to the room. Conference call ran over. The Tokyo office just doesn't respect weekends. She air-kissed Catherine and Emma before turning to me. Oh, Leah, you're here already. That dress is nice. Very sensible. I bit back a retort, reminding myself that today wasn't about Amanda or her subtle digs. It was about Brandon and Emma. Amanda continued, seemingly oblivious to the disruption she was causing. Emma, darling, wait until you see who I brought to the wedding. James Richardson himself. My CEO. He's checking into the hotel now. Such a catch, divorced last year, worth millions. He rarely attends employee family functions, but when I mentioned my nephew was marrying into the Reynolds family. She trailed off with a meaningful look at Catherine. Emma's smile remained fixed but noticeably cooled. How thoughtful of you to bring your boss to our wedding, Amanda. Oh, it's my pleasure. I'll be sure to introduce you both properly at the reception. Maybe you could seat him at the family table? He's just fascinating company. Catherine stepped in smoothly. I'm afraid the seating arrangements have been finalized, Amanda. But I'm sure James will enjoy meeting everyone during the cocktail hour. Amanda's smile tightened almost imperceptibly before she shrugged. Of course, wherever you put us is fine. Now, do we have champagne? I'm parched after that call. For the next hour, Amanda dominated the suite, offering unsolicited advice to the makeup artist, questioning the photographer's choice of lighting, and repeatedly checking her phone while loudly announcing updates from her work email. I focused on helping Emma's bridesmaids with their final preparations, staying as far from my sister as possible. When it was time to head to the church, I managed to ride in a different car from Amanda, sharing instead with Catherine and Emma's grandmother. Catherine, perhaps sensing my tension, patted my hand. Families can be complicated, she said kindly. But today is about those two wonderful young people, and nothing else matters. I nodded gratefully, determined to maintain that perspective. The church looked magical, decorated with cascading white flowers and soft greenery. I was escorted to my seat in the front row, directly across from the Reynolds family. To my dismay, my parents had saved a seat between them for Amanda, placing me at the end of the row. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, but I fixed my gaze forward, refusing to let it dampen my spirits. When the music began and Brandon appeared at the altar with his best man, my heart swelled with pride. He looked so handsome in his tuxedo, so grown up yet still somehow my little boy. Our eyes met, and he gave me a special smile, one I knew was just for me. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The ceremony was perfect. Emma was radiant as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm. The couple had written their own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the church as they promised to support each other's dreams, to be each other's safe harbor, to choose each other every day. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the joy on their faces was so pure it took my breath away. During the post-ceremony photographs, Amanda managed to insert herself into several family shots, positioning herself prominently even though the photographer had to repeatedly ask her to step back. As we waited for our turn with the bride and groom, I overheard her speaking to an elegant older man who I assumed was her boss, James Richardson. My sisters had such a difficult time of it, she was saying in a hushed voice that was nevertheless designed to carry. Single mother, you know. Never quite got her career off the ground. We've all tried to help, but some people just can't seem to catch a break. Brandon's been such a bright spot, though, successful despite it all. Must have gotten his ambition from our side of the family. My cheeks burned as I pretended not to hear. Mr. Richardson's gaze flickered to me briefly, his expression unreadable, before he responded to Amanda in a voice too low for me to catch. Before heading to the reception, I ducked into the church restroom for a moment alone. As I reapplied my lipstick with slightly shaking hands, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the hiring manager at Tech Future, confirming our interview for the following Tuesday. This small reminder of my potential future helped steady me. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and headed out to celebrate my son's special day, regardless of what Amanda might say or do. The Grand Hilton's ballroom took my breath away. Soft lighting from crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with lush floral arrangements. A string quartet played in the corner as guests mingled during the cocktail hour, champagne flutes in hand. Everything was elegant without being ostentatious, perfectly reflecting Emma and Brandon's taste. I found my assigned seat at the family table, relieved to see I was positioned between Brandon's best friend Marcus and Emma's grandmother rather than next to my parents or Amanda. From my vantage point, I could see Amanda holding court near the bar, her boss James Richardson at her side as she introduced him to various guests with grand gestures and animated conversation. The newlyweds made their entrance to enthusiastic applause, looking so happy it made my heart ache in the best possible way. During dinner, I chatted easily with Marcus and Emma's grandmother, feeling more relaxed than I had all day. The food was exquisite, the wine excellent, and watching Brandon move from table to table with his bride, graciously thanking their guests, filled me with quiet pride. After the main course, the MC announced it was time for toasts. Brandon's best man delivered a heartfelt speech that struck the perfect balance between humorous anecdotes and sincere emotion. Emma's maid of honor followed with equally touching remarks. Then, to my surprise, the MC called Amanda's name. And now, a few words from the groom's aunt, Amanda Mitchell. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Amanda wasn't supposed to give a toast. This wasn't on the program. I looked to Brandon, whose confused expression confirmed this was unexpected. Amanda practically sashayed to the microphone, champagne in hand, her dress catching the light as she moved. Her boss watched with undisguised admiration from his table near the front. For those who don't know me, I'm Amanda Mitchell, Brandon's fabulous aunt and only sister to his mother, Leah. She gestured in my direction, causing heads to turn toward me. I've had the privilege of watching Brandon grow up from an adorable, chubby-cheeked baby into the handsome, successful man we see today. She paused, taking a deliberate sip of champagne. I noticed her glass was nearly empty, at least her third since the reception began. I want to share a little story about Brandon and my sister. When Brandon was about 7, Leah was going through one of her transitional periods between jobs. My stomach clenched. What was she doing? Money was tight, as it often was, Amanda continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Brandon needed new shoes for school, but there just wasn't room in the budget that week. So you know what this little sweetheart did? He took his birthday money, all $27 of it, and tried to give it to his mom to help out. There were a few ahs from the guests, but I noticed uncomfortable glances being exchanged. This wasn't an appropriate wedding toast, it was veering into humiliating territory. That's always been our Brandon, putting others first, taking responsibility beyond his years. Which is probably why he's turned out so wonderfully despite the circumstances of his upbringing. Brandon's jaw tightened visibly. Emma reached for his hand under the table. I sometimes think about how different Brandon's life might have been if Leah had made different choices. If she'd finished her degree instead of getting pregnant at 19. If she'd built a career instead of jumping from one dead-end job to another. The room had gone painfully quiet. I felt heat creeping up my neck into my face. But I suppose everything happens for a reason, Amanda continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension she was creating. And today we're celebrating the fact that Brandon has found his perfect match in Emma. A young woman from a stable, successful family who can provide the kind of security and opportunity that he deserves. She raised her glass higher, her words slightly slurring now. So here's to the happy couple. And here's to my sister Leah, the jobless loser who couldn't keep a man or a job, but somehow managed to raise a son who was smart enough to marry up in the world. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen in my seat, the blood rushing in my ears so loudly I thought I might faint. Never, in all our years of strained relations, had Amanda so publicly and cruelly humiliated me. Through my shock, I was vaguely aware of movement. Brandon had stood up so abruptly his chair tipped backward. His face was flushed with anger as he strode toward the microphone. Emma was right behind him, her expression a mix of horror and determination. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't sit there while my humiliation became the centerpiece of my son's wedding reception. I rose unsteadily to my feet, mumbled an excuse to no one in particular, and headed for the nearest exit, fighting tears that threatened to spill over. Behind me, I heard Brandon's voice over the microphone, tight with controlled fury. "I'd like to thank my aunt for that completely inappropriate and inaccurate representation of my mother and my upbringing." I paused in the doorway, unable to help myself. "What my aunt failed to mention," Brandon continued, "is that my mother worked 3 jobs at once to put food on our table. That she sat up with me through countless asthma attacks and never once complained about the medical bills. That she helped me with homework after working 12-hour days. That she taught me the value of education, hard work, and treating people with dignity, something my aunt clearly never learned." Emma stood beside him now, her hand on his arm in support. "My mother sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. She put my needs before hers every single day. And yes, there were tough times financially, but I never once felt anything less than completely loved and supported." Tears were flowing freely down my cheeks now as Brandon's voice grew stronger. "The measure of success isn't a corner office or a designer wardrobe. It's integrity. It's kindness. It's resilience in the face of challenges. By every measure that actually matters, my mother is the most successful person I know." The room erupted in applause. Through blurry eyes, I saw Emma's parents standing, leading the ovation. My parents remained seated, looking uncomfortable, while Amanda stood by the microphone, her mouth hanging open in shock. I felt a presence beside me and turned to find James Richardson, Amanda's boss, regarding me with curious intensity. "Mrs. Mitchell? I believe we should talk," he said quietly, gesturing toward a small seating area in the hotel lobby outside the ballroom. Numb and overwhelmed, I followed him, unsure what else to do. Behind us, I could hear Brandon asking the band to start playing, clearly trying to shift the focus back to celebration where it belonged. "I apologize for pulling you away," James said as we sat down, "but I thought you might appreciate a moment to collect yourself." He offered me a handkerchief, which I accepted gratefully. "Thank you," I managed, dabbing at my eyes. "I'm sorry about all of that. It's not what Brandon and Emma deserve on their wedding day." "You have nothing to apologize for," he replied firmly. "If anyone should be apologizing, it's your sister, who works for me." I looked up in surprise. "Actually," he continued, "I believe we may have more to discuss than just tonight's unfortunate incident." "Leah Mitchell, your name seemed familiar when Amanda mentioned it earlier today. I recently reviewed a design portfolio submitted to our digital experience team. Would that happen to be yours?" I stared at James Richardson in disbelief. You've seen my portfolio?" He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I make it a point to review all final candidates for our creative positions. Your minimalist approach to the healthcare client mock-up was particularly impressive. Clean, intuitive navigation, excellent accessibility considerations. Not what I'd expect from someone Amanda describes as, what was the phrase? A jobless loser?" I felt a flush of embarrassment mixed with pride. I submitted that application last week. I had no idea it had progressed to final consideration. "It hasn't officially," he admitted. "But it will now. I'd like you to come in for a formal interview on Monday, if you're available." My mind raced. "I actually have an interview scheduled with Tech Future on Tuesday." A slight smile tugged at his lips. "Tech Future is an excellent company. Small, but innovative. They'd be lucky to have you." He paused. "But I should mention that our position offers comprehensive benefits, flexible remote work options, and a starting salary that I suspect would significantly exceed their offer." Before I could respond, the lobby doors opened, and Brandon emerged, scanning the area until he spotted me. He hurried over, concern etched on his face. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm so sorry about Amanda. What she did was unforgivable." I stood and embraced him. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than fine, actually." I gestured to James. "This is Mr. Richardson, Amanda's boss." He was just keeping me company. Brandon's expression hardened slightly as he extended his hand. Sir. I apologize if my comments about my aunt put you in an awkward position. James shook Brandon's hand firmly. No apology necessary. Your defense of your mother was entirely warranted. In fact, I was just telling her how impressed I am with her design portfolio. I've invited her to interview for our digital experience designer position on Monday. Brandon's eyes widened as he looked between us. Mom? You applied at DG Trend? I nodded. I didn't mention it because, well, you know how Amanda can be about her territory. Brandon's surprise gave way to a grin. That's amazing. Wait until Emma hears this. James cleared his throat. I should return to the reception. Mrs. Mitchell, Leah, I look forward to our meeting on Monday. 9 o'clock? I'll be there, I promised. As James walked back toward the ballroom, Brandon turned to me. Mom, I'm so proud of you. But are you sure you want to work at the same company as Amanda? I sighed. I don't know. It's a great opportunity, but you're right, it could be complicated. Let's not worry about that now. This is your wedding day. You should be with your bride, not out here dealing with family drama. Brandon hesitated. Emma sent me to find you. She's worried. Everyone is. Well, except Amanda and Grandma and Grandpa. What's Amanda doing now? Trying to play it off like she was just making a joke that came out wrong. Nobody's buying it. He offered me his arm. Will you come back in? Please? Emma and I want to do our first dance, but it wouldn't feel right without you there. How could I refuse? I took his arm and allowed him to lead me back into the reception. As we entered, I was surprised to see Emma's parents approaching us immediately. Leah, we want you to know how deeply sorry we are about what happened, Catherine said, taking my hands in hers. That was completely unacceptable. David nodded gravely. Brandon and Emma have asked Amanda to leave, and we fully support that decision. I glanced around the room and indeed saw no sign of my sister. You didn't have to do that, I said to Brandon. Yes, we did, Emma replied, joining us. No one speaks to my family that way. And you're my family now too, Leah. The simple declaration brought fresh tears to my eyes. Emma hugged me tightly before she and Brandon moved to the center of the dance floor for their first dance. I watched from the sidelines, my heart full despite the earlier humiliation. Catherine and David remained beside me, a silent but meaningful show of support. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of dancing, cake cutting, and genuine celebration. My parents kept their distance, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but unwilling to leave early. I made no effort to approach them, focusing instead on the joy of the occasion and the unexpected opportunity that had presented itself. By the time Brandon and Emma departed amid a shower of rose petals, I felt emotionally drained but strangely empowered. For once, Amanda's cruelty had been publicly recognized and addressed rather than quietly endured. And somehow, miraculously, it had led to a potential career breakthrough. I returned to my hotel room to find multiple missed calls and text messages from Amanda. That was completely unfair. I was just making a joke. You're obviously overreacting as usual. Did you seriously tell Brandon to kick me out? My own nephew? James left right after I did. What did you say to him? I ignored them all and fell into an exhausted sleep. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal gray suit I'd purchased secondhand and had tailored for interviews, and arrived at DG Trend's sleek downtown office building 30 minutes early. The interview process was thorough but energizing. I met with James briefly before being introduced to the creative team and their department head. The technical assessment challenged me to solve a real-world design problem on the spot, which I tackled with confidence born from years of finding creative solutions to difficult situations. By early afternoon, I was invited back to James's office, where he and the HR director presented a formal offer. The salary was indeed generous, nearly double what I'd earned in my best year of freelancing, with benefits that would provide the security I'd lacked for so long. "We'd like you to start next Monday, if that works for you," James said. "You'll be working primarily with our healthcare and education clients to optimize their digital experiences." "That sounds perfect," I replied, still somewhat dazed by how quickly everything was happening. As I left his office with the signed offer letter in hand, I nearly collided with Amanda in the hallway. She was returning from lunch, her expression morphing from casual to shocked when she recognized me. "Leah? What are you doing here?" Her eyes darted to the folder in my hand, emblazoned with the company logo. "I just finished my interview," I replied calmly. "And accepted an offer." Her face paled. "You're working here? That's not possible. You can't just..." "Amanda." James's voice came from behind me. He had stepped out of his office and was regarding my sister with cool professionalism. "My office, please. Now." Amanda's eyes widened in alarm, but she nodded and moved past me. As she walked by, I noticed her hands were trembling slightly. I continued to the elevator, resisting the urge to linger and eavesdrop. Whatever conversation was about to take place between Amanda and her boss was their business. I had a future to prepare for. That evening, as I was researching DG Trend's recent projects to familiarize myself with their work, my phone rang. It was Amanda, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "You did this on purpose," she accused without preamble. "You applied to my company to embarrass me." "I applied because the position matched my skills and experience," I replied evenly. "I had no idea you'd humiliate yourself at Brandon's wedding." "Well, congratulations," she spat. "James fired me today. Cited a pattern of unprofessional behavior and concerns about team dynamics. After 7 years. Are you happy now?" I felt a moment of shock, quickly replaced by a strange calm. "Amanda, I didn't ask for or expect you to be fired. That was James's decision based on your behavior. You turned my boss against me. My own sister. No, Amanda. You did that all by yourself when you chose to publicly humiliate me at my son's wedding. James was there. He saw and heard everything." She was crying now, a sound I hadn't heard since we were children. "What am I supposed to do? My apartment, my car payment, I need this job." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered every cutting remark, every dismissive glance, every time she had made me feel less than over the years. "I suggest you update your resume," I said quietly. "Good night, Amanda." I ended the call and sat in silence for a long moment. There was no satisfaction in Amanda's distress, no joy in her downfall. Only a quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences arrive with unexpected swiftness. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. "How could you do this to your sister? She's devastated. Your father and I are very disappointed in you." Of course they would blame me. In their eyes, Amanda had always been the daughter who could do no wrong, while I was the perpetual disappointment. Some things never changed. I put my phone on silent and returned to my research. Tomorrow was a new day, the first of a new chapter in my life. And for once, I was looking forward to writing it on my own terms. 6 months passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. My position at DG Trend evolved from challenging to comfortable as I mastered new systems and built positive relationships with my colleagues and clients. For the first time in my adult life, I enjoyed financial stability, enough to move from my cramped apartment to a modern 2-bedroom condo closer to downtown. I even started a modest retirement account, something that had seemed like an impossible luxury during Brandon's growing up years. Brandon and Emma visited often, bringing takeout and helping me decorate my new space. Their happiness remained untarnished by the wedding day drama, their marriage a beautiful partnership that warmed my heart to witness. "Mom, this place is gorgeous," Brandon said during one visit, admiring the view from my small balcony. "I can't believe how much has changed in just a few months." "Sometimes I can't believe it either," I admitted. It feels like I've been holding my breath for 20 years and finally get to exhale. Emma joined us, handing me a glass of wine. You deserve every bit of this success, Leah. I just wish it hadn't come with so much family tension. The family tension she referred to was the continued estrangement from my parents and Amanda. After blaming me for Amanda's firing, my parents had maintained minimal contact, sending only a terse congratulatory text when I told them about my new apartment. Amanda had gone completely silent after our phone call the night of her firing. Through industry connections, I'd heard she'd struggled to find comparable employment, eventually accepting a lower-level position at a smaller agency. I felt no satisfaction in this knowledge, only a lingering sadness for what our relationship could have been. I've been thinking a lot about boundaries lately, I told Brandon and Emma. About how I allowed myself to be treated for so many years because I was so desperate for family approval. I don't think I can go back to that, even if it means limited contact with your grandparents. Brandon nodded thoughtfully. I've been having similar thoughts. I love Grandma and Grandpa, but the way they've handled this whole situation, it's made me see them differently. And honestly, I don't miss Aunt Amanda's presence in my life at all. Families are complicated, Emma said, echoing her mother's words from the wedding day. But the beautiful thing is we can create our own families too, people who truly support and respect us. The wisdom in her statement stayed with me long after they'd left that evening. I'd spent so many years feeling like the broken branch of the Mitchell family tree, never quite measuring up to expectations. But perhaps the problem wasn't me, it was the expectations themselves, and the people who held them. A week later, I received a surprising email notification. The sender, Amanda Mitchell. Subject line, coffee? My finger hovered over the delete button before curiosity won out and I opened it. Leah. It's taken me months to work up the courage to write this. I've started and deleted this email at least 20 times. The truth is, I don't know how to begin apologizing for my behavior at Brandon's wedding, or for the years of subtle, and not so subtle, ways I've undermined and hurt you. There's no excuse for any of it. Losing my job and reputation has been a humbling experience, to say the least. For the first time in my life, I've had to face real consequences for my actions, and it's forced me to take a hard look at who I've become. I don't like what I see. I understand if you want nothing to do with me. I wouldn't blame you. But if you're willing, I'd like to meet for coffee sometime, neutral territory where we could talk. Not to ask for anything or to make excuses, but just to apologize properly, face to face. Amanda. I read the email 3 times, searching for the hidden agenda, the manipulative undertone I'd come to expect from my sister. But it seemed genuinely contrite, vulnerability showing through the carefully chosen words. After 2 days of consideration, I replied with a simple suggestion of time and place, a quiet cafe halfway between our respective workplaces. Part of me expected her to cancel or simply not show up. But when I arrived, Amanda was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She looked different, less polished, more human. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a simple blouse and slacks, her makeup minimal, her expression nervous rather than confident. I ordered your usual, she said as I sat down. Oat milk latte with an extra shot. You still drink that, right? The fact that she remembered such a small detail surprised me. Yes, thank you. An awkward silence settled between us until Amanda took a deep breath. Leah, I am so sorry. For the wedding, for getting you fired from that restaurant job in college when I complained to the manager because you couldn't switch shifts to drive me to the mall, for telling Brandon when he was 12 that you couldn't afford his school trip because you'd spent the money on yourself when you were actually working double shifts to save up for it, for everything. The specific examples caught me off guard. I hadn't realized she even remembered these incidents, let alone recognized their impact. What happened? I asked simply. After all these years? Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Losing my job was just the beginning. My friends, the people I thought were friends, disappeared and I couldn't have the hour tabs anymore. My boyfriend broke up with me when I had to downsize to a smaller apartment. It was like watching my entire life collapse in slow motion. She wiped at her eyes. And through it all, I kept thinking about what Brandon said at the wedding. About you working 3 jobs, about your sacrifices. I've been comparing myself to you my whole life, Leah, but I was measuring all the wrong things. I had the title, the wardrobe, the address, but you had the character, the resilience, the love of your son. When everything superficial was stripped away, I realized how empty my life really was. I sipped my coffee, absorbing her words. It couldn't have been easy to reach out. It wasn't, she admitted. My therapist has been encouraging me for weeks. Yes, I'm in therapy now, she added with a self-deprecating laugh. Turns out I have a lot to work through. We probably both do, I acknowledged. Family patterns run deep. We talked for nearly 2 hours, peeling back layers of childhood memories, adolescent rivalries, and adult resentments. There were tears, uncomfortable truths, and even a few tentative laughs. It wasn't a miraculous reconciliation, too much had happened for that, but it was a beginning, a fragile bridge across the chasm that had separated us for so long. As we prepared to leave, Amanda hesitated. I'm job hunting again. The position I took after DG Trend, it wasn't a good fit. I was wondering, would you be willing to look at my resume? You always were better at writing than me. I considered the request, searching for the old manipulation but finding only genuine vulnerability. I can do that, I agreed. Email it to me tonight, and I'll send you feedback tomorrow. Her smile was grateful, lacking the usual edge of competition. Thank you, Leah. Really. In the weeks that followed, our relationship took tentative steps forward. Coffee became a bi-weekly tradition. I helped Amanda revamp her resume and portfolio, offering honest feedback that she accepted with unprecedented grace. She, in turn, began making efforts to repair her relationship with Brandon, sending a heartfelt letter of apology that he acknowledged with cautious optimism. 3 months after our first coffee meeting, Brandon and Emma invited the entire family to dinner at their home. They had news to share. Emma was pregnant. I would be a grandmother. The dinner could have been tense, with my parents, Amanda, and me in the same room for the first time since the wedding. But something had shifted. My parents, perhaps softened by the prospect of a great-grandchild, made awkward but sincere efforts to engage with me about my job and new home. Amanda kept her contributions to the conversation modest, focusing on celebrating Brandon and Emma rather than drawing attention to herself. As we gathered around the table, Brandon raised his glass. To family, not just the one we're born into, but the one we create and nurture every day. And to our little one, who will be surrounded by people who have learned some hard but valuable lessons about what truly matters. I caught Amanda's eye across the table, and she gave me a small, genuine smile. We had a long way to go, all of us. Old patterns don't disappear overnight, and trust, once broken, requires patient rebuilding. But sitting there, celebrating new life and new beginnings, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. My journey from struggling single mother to successful professional hadn't been a straight line. It had been messy, painful, filled with detours and obstacles, many placed there by the very people who should have supported me most. But those challenges had forged in me a strength and resilience that no corner office or impressive title could provide. The public humiliation at Brandon's wedding had been a catalyst for change, not just in my career, but in how I viewed myself and my relationships. It had forced painful truths into the light, where they could finally begin to heal. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out had Amanda not taken that microphone, had she not spoken those cruel words in front of James Richardson. Sometimes our greatest blessings arrive disguised as our worst moments, if we have the courage to move through them with integrity. I hope my story resonates with those of you who have faced similar family struggles or felt diminished by the people who should lift you up. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions or by conventional markers of success. True success lies in resilience, in kindness, in the ability to rise after falling, and in the courage to set healthy boundaries even with those we love. Have you ever experienced a moment of public humiliation that unexpectedly led to positive change? Or found yourself healing a relationship you thought was beyond repair? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on family dynamics, personal growth, and unexpected second chances. And remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story on your own terms. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and peace on your own journey of healing and growth.